What's up guys, welcome back to another video where today I want to talk about and go on a little ramble about the future of the Resident Evil remakes. Now, there is obviously a lot ahead of us in terms of Resident Evil, and Capcom is doing a great job with all the recent stuff, including the recent remakes of 2, 3, and 4. Whether 3 is debatable or not, honestly, but outside of that, in my opinion, I think they've been doing great, whether it's been remakes, mainline games like 7 or 8, iffy on the Resistance and Reverse, to be honest with you, but I wanted to throw my attention on what the hell is Capcom doing with Resident Evil remakes. Now, obviously, it's been confirmed before, after Resident Evil 4's remake was basically a success, that Capcom is going to move on and create multiple more Resident Evil remakes in the future. With this already confirmed, we can already speculate what is next for Resident Evil. Well, if we look at the mainline games, you'd probably think Resident Evil 5, right? Because of Resident Evil 4. Now, some people might disagree with me on this, but Resident Evil Code Veronica, in my opinion, is a mainline Resident Evil installment. I think it's very clear, at least in my opinion, that Code Veronica fits in the main story very well. Now, Code Veronica is a continuation of Resident Evil 2, but rather from Claire's side, except it didn't have a number attached to it. But it is very important to the Resident Evil story because Wesker is included in it as well as Chris Redfield. Both are very important characters, and it leads on from Resident Evil 1 into Code Veronica into 5, which I've mentioned before on a past video. Now, why am I really talking about this stuff again in particular? Well, I wanted to look at the leak that people were talking about months ago surrounding Dust Golem, also known as Aesthetic Gamer 1. Now, I want to put into preface real quick that Dust Golem isn't the most reliable leaker out there. He has leaked a lot of stuff that deals with horror stuff. Sometimes it's Resident Evil, sometimes it's Silent Hill, and usually the most things that he gets right is usually Silent Hill, to be honest with you. He leaked the short message a couple years ago, and most of those leaks were actually very accurate, as well as probably also leaking the Silent Hill 2 remake, so I would honestly wager that he is more reliable when it comes to Silent Hill, albeit that doesn't make everything he says be reliable. But when it comes to Resident Evil remakes, he actually had this to say back in May, which I think is very interesting. So once again, Aesthetic Gamer, aka Dust Golem, is the leaker here, and I'm going to read it out. Fuck it, I am choosing to be the one to burst the bubble in a bigger way of what's going on with Resident Evil stuff. First, I would wipe the expectations of Resident Evil 9 being announced this summer, period. The initial murmurs I heard I now do believe are right in Resident Evil 9's announcement. Now, he was technically right on that, and even at the Game Awards, there was no voice or anything, and we didn't hear anything about Resident Evil 9 in the summer, so he's right about that. 2 out of 4 is further away from this upcoming summer. Sorry for the back and forth on that, that's my fault. Resident Evil 1 remake rumors are bullshit. As far as I know, Resident Evil 1 is not in any form of development at all right now. Resident Evil 5 is not actively in development now either. It's been funny seeing this. Now, I don't really know why he would say something like this, because it wouldn't be out of the ordinary to hear something like Resident Evil 1 remake being in development or Resident Evil 5 remake being in development. Now, I don't know much about Dust Golem or anything like that, but I know that it is very believable. Again, we're referring to rumors here, we're not actually referring to actual leaks, which is what he's talking about, which, if you're gonna go with rumors, I guess technically that kind of goes hand in hand with leaks somehow, but in terms of rumors, it's more, once again, people are speculating or thinking that's gonna happen, which in my opinion is completely fine. I honestly don't disagree with anything that is in terms of rumors, because a lot of people don't really care. But anyway, just to go on before talking more about this, 3 out of 4 be what people think is happening publicly. Resident Evil 9 is pushed back to late 2025 to 2026. If everything I've heard correct, which I fully believe it is, and I know others have hinted this, and I'm not the first one to say this publicly actually, just it's not caught on, there's actually a remake of Resident Evil 0 and Code Veronica in development right now. I've talked to many others behind the scenes about this at this point. It's something I heard over a year ago. I think it was going to get out whether I was the one to say it or not, and that's about it. Now, I'm gonna get straight to the next message real quick. This thing was also connected to it. He was responding to a comment, and that comment was, wouldn't the 0 and CV remake remakes be handled by M2 anyway, so not to detract 9 and Resident Evil 5 Remake, which I am going to guess that he is referring to the second team that is working on it, which I think did Resident Evil 3 Remake, as well as Resident Evil 4's Remake's version of Separate Ways. And then Dusk Golem said, from what I've heard, Zero is primarily being led by K2 and M2, who most recently did Separate Ways DLC for RE4 and were in support studio on RE4. Code Veronica's Capcom Dev 1 with a lot of the same people who worked on RE2 and RE4 though. So that being said, it's really interesting. Here's the thing. I'm only pointing this stuff out because I feel like mentioning it within the context of the video, because if this dude is right, which again, he's been wrong in the past, and I don't know the full history because it's been a long time since I've honestly viewed his stuff, so I don't know for a fact that he's the best leaker or anything like that, but I know that he doesn't have the best reputation as some people like to say he is, but he does get really on point with some stuff, and he is the first to show stuff, especially like I've said with Silent Hill: The Short Message. He was the one that leaked all of that before anyone else talked about it. He was basically the primary leaker when it comes to those things. But then I was thinking more about this, and if Capcom is gonna go this route, it really confused me a lot. So when it comes to Resident Evil 1 Remake, and then we're going on to Resident Evil Code Veronica Remake, and then Resident Evil 5 Remake, I think that that would have been the best solution. But if they're actually going this route and doing a Resident Evil 0 Remake, and then doing a Resident Evil Code Veronica Remake, I think it's very interesting that they're gonna go this way. So that kind of questions it if they are going to remake Resident Evil 5 after both of those and not do a 1 remake, or they're just gonna go with this route, which if they're gonna go this route, I'm gonna be honest, I would honestly be really happy, despite the fact that I do genuinely believe that we should probably get a 1 remake. Now, I want you to hear me out real quick. Resident Evil 1 Remake, the original, the 2002 version, is an amazing game. I love the remake dearly. In fact, it is probably my favorite Resident Evil game to date. Nothing is going to delete that or change that from history. It is always going to be there no matter what. That being said though, considering the amount of remakes they're doing right now, if they do remake Zero and Code Veronica, which obviously Zero kind of is a lead-in or tie-in to 1's remake initially, at least back in 2002, considering they came out the same year, it would be perfect if they remade the first one after they finished Zero. But if they're going to release them in that order of Zero Remake and then Code Veronica, to me, I don't know why, but I feel like that would be very confusing. Because if they do plan on a 1 remake, which again, nothing is absolutely confirmed, but if they do a 1 remake, it clearly has Jill and it has Chris Redfield and Albert Wesker, but I think that is a great lead-in into Code Veronica's remake, which again goes into the story of Chris and Wesker's relationship throughout the 3 games. Now, if you don't know already, it all starts with Resident Evil 1, and then it goes into Resident Evil Code Veronica, and then it goes into Resident Evil 5, which if they do 5 before 1 remake, I think that would be really, really weird. To restate this again, none of this, and I mean absolutely none of this, is confirmed, and it's never been confirmed to date that Resident Evil 5 Remake is being worked on. A lot of people seem to say that nowadays, and I really disagree in the fact that they outright say it, but it isn't confirmed. It's never been confirmed. Resident Evil 4 Remake might have teased it, but that doesn't mean that it's going to happen. Now, I do obviously think that Resident Evil 5 Remake will happen eventually, but we do not know for a fact that it is the next remake that is going to happen, for a fact at least. Otherwise, I don't really know. I just felt like going into a little ramble here because, honestly, I don't know what the hell is going on with the future of Resident Evil. I don't think we need to have any news. I'm not gonna be asking for, oh my god, what are they doing with Resident Evil? At the end of the day, I think we should wish the best for Capcom. If we don't get a Resident Evil game next year, or in fact, if we don't get any news for Resident Evil next year, it's not the end of the world. But I think it's very interesting to think about in terms of the future remakes, because honestly, I'm really excited regardless of what we get. But again, for consistency's sakes, if they're going to remake Zero and they're going to plan on making even more remakes in the future, I think the best decision, in my opinion, would be remaking 1 again, and then Code Veronica, and then 5. And the reason why I would do that is because 5 is the conclusion of that story in a way, as well as having Resident Evil Code Veronica, of course. And the fact that Resident Evil 1 is getting remade, in my opinion, is because as much as I love the remake we already have of it, there is a large majority that I know Capcom for a fact is seeing seeing, and they know that they're probably not going to play the way that it is played, which in itself is fixed camera angles and tank controls and everything like that. As much as I genuinely do love that stuff, a lot of the fan base, and I don't mean to say the exact majority, but a lot of the modern Resident Evil fan base unfortunately doesn't want to play like that, and they'd rather play something like in third person rather than in fixed camera angles, which is completely fine, and I think it is completely fair if they remake it another time, because at the end of the day, just like the other remakes, we will always have the original as well as the 2002 remake. That being said though, that's all I really had to say about this. I just felt like talking about it. So I'll see you guys later. Bye.